Part 115. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1144. Chapter 1141. The disaster that swept the tribe couldn't have been caused by the Lord of Thunder, right? Monthly ticket adds 1 update. Although Greet looked at the old man eagerly and wanted to go up and check him out, he never dared to act rashly. Not to mention that Idian had already warned him, nor that there was a powerful aura coming from the cave ahead. Let's just say that it has been said since ancient times that doctors don't knock on the door. As a doctor, you can only sit at home and wait for patients to come to your door. At most, you can advertise that there is a clinic here, or ring a bell to let others know I am here. For example, when you see a patient, you grab him and ask him if he wants treatment, or you knock on the patient's door and ask him if he needs treatment. As a doctor, you absolutely cannot do such a thing. On the one hand, the patient may be afraid of others saying that he is sick, or he may not think that he is sick at all, or even if he knows, he may not appreciate it when others point his nose at him and say so. On the other hand, since ancient times, patients have always paid attention to the word seeking when seeking medical treatment. He didn't ask for it, he didn't take it seriously and didn't listen to the doctor. If the compliance is not good, the curative effect will not be good. If the curative effect is not good, the doctor will try to get involved, but in the end he will lose his own brand, so why bother? So Greet shut up obediently, listened to Idian and the old man chatting, exchanging the latest situation, and then took them inside. Instead of taking a seat directly, he was brought to the back cave, in front of the largest mural. "Come, little Gretel." Idian stood in front of the mural with his hands behind his hands, looked up for a moment, and waved to Gretel. "Come and pay respect to the master. Then, we will go to eat." "Owner. Where is the master?" Gretel stepped forward quickly. As soon as I stood in front of the mural, the majestic and desolate momentum immediately hit my face. It was a vulture larger than any bird Gret had ever seen in the rainforest. It spread its wings and swooped down. Looking at its momentum, it almost seemed to rush out of the rock wall. The vulture is completely black except for the huge white spots on its wings. From a distance, it looks like 2 eyes open to the ground. There is a circle of white feathers on the exposed neck, and the exposed head, neck, and crop are all painted with ochre, showing an extremely vivid red. Our divine bird, our revered god. The old man stood tremblingly on the edge, his right hand touching his chest, and he bent down with difficulty. He tapped the ground a few times with his bone staff, threw a handful of hay into the brazier next to him, and started singing loudly. The voice was hoarse and cadenced. Following the old man's voice, the tribal warriors, women, and children outside joined in the chorus one by one to pay respect to their gods. Although Greet couldn't understand a single word of the lyrics, just standing by and listening to it felt like a vast atmosphere coming to his face, as if he were high in the sky, overlooking the flowing clouds and mountains below him. "No, wait." Gretel shook his head vigorously, sneezed, and quickly cast himself a cleaning technique and a bubble technique. Then, he moved closer to Idian. This old man, the hay he threw into the brazier has a hallucinogenic effect. Although it is very slight and harmless to people, especially to a level 12 nature priest like him, it actually has a little effect on guiding his mind. "Just discovered." Idian's voice was thin and sweet, with a little smile. "You can't be so unwary. Little Greet, I'm by your side this time, and the other party is not hostile. What if you go on an adventure alone?" "Alas, sorrow. This little cub is already level 12, but he still doesn't have much vigilance. He looks like this, and if he wants to travel around the world alone without the protection of an expert, he will overturn wherever he goes. Aren't you here? Besides, I don't feel any danger." Gretel muttered softly using the communication technique. He followed Udion's example, clapped his palms 3 times in front of the golden eagle portrait, leaned forward slightly, and paid tribute to the divine bird in the sky. Well, just go to the temple to worship the gods. Anyway, it doesn't cost any money, just pay me some respects. If this Kondor, or if the god of this tribe wants to ask for more faith from him, he will directly say, in fact, I am the divine enlightener of the god of nature. The moment he lowered his head, a huge pressure came down from the air, and before Greet looked up, he suddenly put it back. When Greet straightened up, the old man had already smiled slightly and invited them out with his hand. Greet turned back step by step. He really wanted to take a good look at the original style murals in this cave that he had never seen before, but he could only be pulled by Udion and go out honestly. Obviously, this cave full of murals is used to worship gods, and their residence tonight, or even the place to eat, cannot be here. The natives have placed food in the open space outside the cave. The old priest leaned on his crutch, sat down on a large smooth stone, and invited the guests to take their seats. In front of the bonfire in the open space, the aroma overflows. Light yellow corn mush, bubbling in a clay pot painted with black and red figures. On the flat and smooth stone, the thin corn tortillas were roasted to brown, and an indigenous woman scooped a spoonful of meat sauce with a wooden spoon and poured it thickly on top. Buried in the ashes beside the campfire are potatoes of various sizes. After peeling off the hot and blackened skin, they are steaming with fragrance. Greet glanced at it and felt that he was not very hungry. Beside, Sarala quickly picked up a wooden frame. What is this? There was well, let's just say it was a small 4-legged beast strung on the wooden frame. Greet glanced at it and couldn't figure out why. The skin had been stripped off the thing, and the 4 claws, if they were claws at all, had been chopped off. Its 4 legs were propped up by wood and formed into an X shape, allowing the heat from the campfire to lick it as much as possible. From the 4 legs to both sides of the body, everything was roasted to brown, and the fat flowed drop by drop on it. Occasionally, it would fall down, causing the flames below to shoot up, exciting a burst of fragrance. What is this? Greet took the beast in her hand and asked Idion. Idion took one look and laughed. This is a guinea pig. Well, it's not a mouse, it's not something you used for experiments, and it's not something you took out from some dirty place. These guinea pigs are raised by local people and are very clean. You can eat them with confidence. Gretel bared his teeth, but still didn't dare to eat. Guinea pigs, bamboo rats, Tularomices marnefei. A series of nouns passed through my mind. What if the skin is not peeled cleanly? What if it's not fully cooked? Just in case. Before she could finish her thoughts, Sarala had already snatched the guinea pig and started to chew it happily. While chewing, praise at the same time. It's delicious. It's delicious. It's really fresh. Ha, it's a little spicy. Greet, go get a raw one and bake it so it's not spicy. The meat of this kind of animal will be fishy, and it may not be delicious if it is not spicy. Gretel muttered and walked forward. Glancing over, he saw that most women and children only had corn and potatoes to eat. The amount of food was quite pitiful according to his visual inspection. It was only a small bowl of corn mush and a half-fist-sized potato. The men, especially the young warriors, were slightly better off, and could have a bowl of corn mush, a larger potato, and a corn tortilla, with a spoonful of meat sauce on top of the tortilla. Only the warriors who seemed to be the strongest could get a guinea pig, or a leg from an unknown beast. The total intake, according to Greet's estimate. Anyway, it's not enough, definitely not enough. Gretel's face darkened. He carefully walked around the bonfire, and almost everyone he saw had obvious symptoms of edema. This is especially true for the elderly and children, especially children, whose limbs are like numpoles and whose belly is bulging. The symptoms of malnutrition are already quite obvious. So, that old man. Is it possible that he is malnourished? Greet came closer to Idion and asked him in a low voice. Idion sighed, simply took him up and walked towards the old man. Dear elder, we have a saying in Lin, seeing if a seed falls, a sapling will grow. You and your people have warmly entertained us, and we will repay the same generosity with the same generosity. He said and nodded to Gretel. Gretel slapped the space bag, bang bang, bang bang, the two beasts fell to the ground. A warthog, an iguana, both weighing hundreds of pounds. Idion smiled at him and pointed to the beast on the ground. This is the prey we caught on the way. We also invite our friends from the Condor department to have a taste of the fruits of our hunting. Please. A hint of surprise flashed across the elder's sallow face. He shouted a few words, and immediately some soldiers came forward, dragged the two beasts down, skinned them, cut them into pieces, and the women took over roasting them. In a moment, the steaming fragrance and the surprised cries of women and children floated out from the fire pits and caves. Gretel couldn't help but smile, his brows widened, and he leaned back slightly. Idion smiled at him and then asked the elder. Why, is this period of time difficult for the Condor tribe? It's very difficult. The god in charge of growth and reproduction has stopped blessing us for several years, the elder sighed, with wrinkles on his face gathering together, looking more and more sad. There are fewer and fewer things grown in the fields, whether it's corn, potatoes, peppers, yams and pumpkins. In the past 2 years, the potato harvest was almost non-existent. Weeds and moss are no longer luxuriant, and we have to look for food on the mountains. There are fewer and fewer wild animals every day. Our warriors have to walk farther and climb more mountains to catch a little prey. Even our condor, with its sharp eyes, can no longer guide us to the location of our prey. So, the disaster that swept this tribe was famine? Gretel frowned. Famine was not a disease, so there was really nothing he could do about it. Speaking of which, a few years ago, Teacher and the others killed a demigod who was full of natural power and was in charge of growth and reproduction. Could it be that this caused the famine? Is there any other method? We have tried every possible method, the kingdom still wants us to pay taxes. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Wolf2 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1145. What? You still need to collect taxes when there's a famine like this? Greed finally had some sense and did not ask this question. However, Sarala beside him already ignored him and blurted out. Don't they care if you starve people to death? A flash of embarrassment flashed across the old priest's face and he remained silent. Greet waved her hand gently, signaling Sarala not to ask further questions, but Bernard intervened. Hey, those big tribes collect taxes, who cares whether the small tribes below live or not? It's like this even in the wilderness, you need his protection, you need his help to kill the monsters. In short, you want to survive, you have to pay. The old priest breathed a huge sigh of relief. Obviously, the news that there are too many bastards in the world, and our kingdom is not the only one, has greatly appeased his pride. He turned his head and coughed twice. Actually, we are fine, we are far away and the place is barren. We only need to pay for some beast skins, teeth and other warcraft products. The core area of the kingdom, alas. This sigh made all sorts of twists and turns, causing Gretel's imagination to soar in an instant. The poll tax, land tax, and war tax have been received 80 years later. Why sell your sons and daughters if you can't pay the taxes, demolish your houses and raise the cows? No, there seems to be no cows in this continent, so that means demolishing the houses and raise the alpacas. The taxes paid by the nobles are paid back in full, and the taxes paid by the common people are divided into 37%. Of course, Gretel has no grand goal of liberating all mankind, and he doesn't want to comment on how the indigenous kingdoms collect taxes. He just nodded slightly and asked the old priest as if casually. What about now, has the potato harvest situation improved? Well, if his memory is correct, the potato rot and crop failure seem to be related to some kind of bacteria, or some kind of fungus. The Great Famine in Ireland in the previous life seemed to be the widespread spread of this bacteria. No, the old man sighed sadly. He rubbed his hands, and his whole body seemed to be a little more stooped, hunched over, and huddled up. We brought in some new potatoes from the mountains and replanted them. We did get a lot of harvest at first. But this only lasted for 1 year. Most of this year's potatoes were rotten. That sounds more and more like it. Greed held up his chin and muttered. In my impression, if potatoes are constantly planted with tubers from the previous generation, the varieties will be too single and the disease resistance will gradually weaken. At this time, there is another potato disease, which is mutually contagious. It would be slightly better to replace it with new tubers, but Gretel strongly doubted that the fields where they grew potatoes had not been disinfected at all. Can you show me some raw potatoes? He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Next to him, Idian and Sarah coughed at the same time. Just look at the potatoes, why are you acting like a thief? If distinguished guests like us want to see some potatoes, can we not let them see them? Gretel turned a deaf ear. Although he is a healer and not a natural priest in the traditional sense, he can still try to treat potatoes occasionally. Of course, the premise is that the reason for the failure of the potato harvest is what he guessed, and not some inexplicable factor. For example, if a little demon gnaws potatoes or something, it would be completely inappropriate for the Plague Lord to solve these problems. Obviously, treating humans might be unpopular, but looking at potatoes is less of a problem. Idian did not speak to stop him. He watched the old priest give a few instructions and ask someone to bring a basket of raw potatoes. He also took one, holding it in his hand and turning it around. Did you feel it? He turned and asked. Greet shook his head very honestly, looking left and right, trying to find a place to put down the mage's cabin, opening his workbench, centrifuge, microscope, and a complete set of equipment. Feel? What is feeling? He doesn't know whether the shape of a potato in his hand is normal or abnormal, whether the wrinkled skin is sick or has been stored for too long, whether the skin is a little blue and has gone bad. He has no idea. Not very alive, a voice suddenly sounded next to him. Gretel quickly turned around and saw the elf spellcaster who was traveling with her, the taciturn Ms. Lucia, speaking in a rare voice. Contaminated? Yes, I feel the same way. Yudian nodded repeatedly. There's something eroding and devouring its vitality, making it impossible for the potato to grow normally. It's okay to store it like this now, so it won't rot immediately, but once it's buried in the ground. After being buried in the ground, with abundant water and nutrients, these things that erode the vitality of potatoes will be more active than the potatoes themselves. Without waiting for the potatoes to take root, sprout, complete a life cycle, and produce new potatoes, these things will eat them up and let them rot in the ground. Yes, I feel it too. Idian nodded lightly. As a warrior, his mental power is not as delicate as that of a spellcaster, but it is still sharp enough. After saying this, a hazy green light shrouded the egg-sized potato in his hand. Well, let me see if I can save it with the power of nature. The green light shrouded, sweeping back and forth, sweeping away. Next to him, 7 or 8 pairs of eyes were staring at the potato. The old priest, the young warrior who was ordered to deliver the potatoes, and the indigenous women looming outside the clearing outside the bonfire. Before Gretel set out from Nevis, he had already imbued himself with various magics such as twilight vision and dark vision. He could see at a glance that there were also indigenous children pulling on their mothers' skirts and looking at them eagerly. Potato swallows. Can you still eat these potatoes? It looked dry and wrinkled, and there seemed to be mold spots in some places, and there seemed to be sprouts in some places, and it was a little green. As far as Greet's common sense in preserving potatoes is concerned, this thing can't be eaten, right? You can eat it, you can eat it, the young soldier who brought the potatoes nodded vigorously. These potatoes are still fine, enough for a meal. Of course, this one is a bit inappropriate, but after being purified by the noble linseing, it will definitely be fine. Gretel sighed silently. Even eating moldy potatoes like this shows that the life of the local indigenous people has reached a certain level of misery. In other words, I would rather die of poison than starve to death. Hope they can help. He looked at Udian, who had obviously finished casting the spell, and nodded with satisfaction. Turning sideways, he handed the potatoes in his hand to Luoxia. Can you feel it? The female elf mage rolled her eyes at him. Instead of reaching out to pick it up, he slapped it with a cleaning technique and rolled up the dust and dirt on the potatoes. Idian smiled sheepishly and said, "Forget." Lucia said nothing, her slender fingers fell on the potatoes and stroked them twice. The female elf pondered and nodded. "It's okay. But, how much power do you have to deal with the potatoes that a tribe wants to grow?" Idian was silent for a moment. For a moment, he worked hard to exercise the muscles on his face and smiled at the spellcaster beside him. "Isn't it you?" "I won't do it." Luocia's eyes instantly turned cold. The female elf shook her long silver hair, turned away, and no longer participated in any discussion. "Why?" Idian subconsciously reached out to retain him. Unexpectedly, Luoxia walked a few steps quickly, jumped onto an old tree outside the cave, closed her eyes and fell asleep. "Udian." He shrugged, turned back and smiled at Gretel as if nothing had happened. He spread his hands and made a helpless gesture. "There's nothing you can do. That's how pure naturalistic spellcasters are. Even opening up farmland to plant crops feels like they're destroying nature. Hey, Greet, what can you do? What are you doing?" Gretel had already unfolded the mage's hut and got into it, leaving only Idian's back behind. Behind him, Cyrilla followed suit and followed quickly. She stopped slightly at the door of the mage's cabin and turned to give Idian a sweet smile. "Let's go research." Research. Don't worry, Gretel is awesome, and he will definitely figure it out." "It's not that I'm worried," Idian's raised arm fell weakly. "But, little Gretel, you took away all the potatoes. Although I am just a warrior, I, according to human terms, am also a three-ring nature priest, and I can also be studied together." But Greet obviously had no intention of taking him to study together. He and Cyrilla entered the mage's hut one after another, and the door of the hut disappeared and turned into a wall. The attitude is very obvious, that is, outsiders should not be disturbed. Idian's long pointed ears stood up and then fell down, and stood up again, but he couldn't hear anything. He snorted unconvinced, sat down on the spot, and closed his eyes. Well, this time, the shaking of the earth gave him the answer. The people inside were walking around, and something hard made a clicking sound. Maybe they were chopping potatoes. Buzz buzz, buzz buzz. Idian pricked up his ears and guessed curiously. This movement. Maybe it's crushing, this movement might be grinding, this movement, could it be that the centrifuge is spinning? Don't wait too late. He shouted in vain across the mage's cabin. He didn't know whether the sound transmission function of this thing was turned on or whether the people inside could hear it. Turning around, Bernard looked at him with an incomprehensible expression. "Sir, the boss, and Miss Sarah, they are not like this." "Of course I know," Idian rolled his eyes at him. "I want to remind them not to spend all day and night as soon as they start researching. Pay attention to rest. Gretel should remember that he is still a mage and needs to get enough sleep, right? Idion didn't know if his worries had come true. He only knew that the next morning, just before noon, Greet came out with disheveled hair and a basket of potatoes. Where are the potato fields here? Did you come up with the results of your research? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1146. Chapter 1143. I am the god of nature. No, the messenger of the potato god. Monthly ticket adds 2 updates. Greet opened his red eyes, raised his hand to rake his bird's nest-like hair, and smiled weakly at Idion. Wanting to speak, he opened his mouth, but yawned first. I'm not sure, I still need to do more experiments. I can only say that I have initially isolated something. Too difficult. It's so difficult to isolate pathogens. He was not from the agricultural college. When he was in college, although it was a comprehensive university, there was no agricultural college in the school. The agricultural university was opposite their school. From time to time, I heard from brother schools that dead pigs floated in the lake in front of the school, and that another experimental animal escaped from the agricultural university opposite. In short, Greet really couldn't do anything like isolating germs. He was able to successfully isolate the pathogenic bacteria of various infectious diseases in the past only because he could memorize medical microbiology and infectious diseases well and follow the diagrams. Now, from a pile of potatoes, among God knows how many microorganisms, which one is isolated that may cause disease? Do you know how many microorganisms can be isolated here? Do you know how many microorganisms can be isolated from a piece of soil? Anyway, dozens or hundreds of species are rare, and thousands are not impossible. On human skin alone, there are dozens of long-term bacteria, and together with temporary ones, 100 or 200 species are normal. He didn't even know whether the pathogen was a bacterium or a fungus. Fortunately, there is magic cheating. Greet cut the potato open and cut out the moldy-looking part. Of course, he left a spore and buried it directly in the soil. Then, give the natural power to give birth to. Give it to me. Long. I want to see what you look like when you grow up. Bacteria may undergo morphological changes, may become larger or smaller, may lose capsules, spores, or flagella. Fungi will grow hyphae and spores, and the spores will float around. How can I know what you look like if you don't grow a big baby bump for me? Potatoes carrying pathogenic bacteria grow very quickly when fed by nature. Buds sprout, the main stem is lifted up, and the leaves unfold one by one. Hey hey hey! Green spots appear on the tips of the leaves. Outside the green spots, there is a green halo, which looks dry and withered, as if it has been burned. Gretel perked up. He continued to provide the power of nature, and the potato plants continued to grow hard. Soon, large white mold spots appeared on the backs of the green leaves. That's it? That's it? Then I dug out the tubers from the soil, and sure enough, they were already rotten to the point of mold. Greet cut off small portions of leaves and tubers, crushed them, and diluted them with distilled water. Then, calm down and throw the killing technique inside first. E. coli killed. Pseudomonas aeruginosa killed. Bacillus anthracis, Bacillus typhi, Vibrio cholerae, kill, kill, kill. Kill all the bacteria he can think of. Anyway, Gretel is sure that these epidemic pathogens will never be the culprits that cause the potato crop to fail, and then start the separation. At the same time, microscopic examination. Scorched spots on leaf tips. White mildew spots on the underside of leaves. Moldy potato tubers. Piece by piece, section, cut into very fine slices, stain, and microscopy. Under the microscope, if you see obvious changes in the potato cells, the bacteria near them are more likely to be the culprit. Gretel, what did you see? Sarala energetically started working next to her, and at the same time, she got a share and observed it under the mirror. However, the silver dragon girl didn't have enough patience to look at the microscope. After looking at it for a while, she still ran over and asked Gretel. Have you caught the thing that made the potatoes sick? Not completely sure yet. Greet patiently conducted the experiment. He threw the samples diluted in distilled water one by one into the sterilized, non-contaminated culture medium. Potato leaves, potato slices. Piece by piece, wiped with alcohol, wiped with disinfectant, sterilized in every way he could think of, except boiling. Then, throw the extracted samples into the culture medium, throw magic, stimulate birth, and let them grow. Over and over again, after several back and forth, I finally locked in a few possible gadgets. Gretel was also tired from all the hard work and fell asleep. Sleep for 8 hours, get up early the next morning, and continue fighting. Yudian, I have isolated something that may be the culprit. Where is the potato field? Or give me an open space, I need to do a larger experiment. Since he said that an open space would be fine, Udian took him to find an open space based on the principle of not disturbing him as much as possible. Greet chirped, cutting the suspected diseased potatoes into pieces, with a sprout in each piece, and buried them directly in the soil. Then, he closed his eyes slightly and recalled the suspected disease strains he had isolated, sweeping, and sweeping again. Are you going to give birth now? Idian really couldn't stand it anymore. From the looks of it, Gretel has never farmed or cultivated any medicinal or magical plants. If they farm like him, all the farmers will starve to death. Gretel looked at him blankly, not knowing what was wrong with him. Idian shook his head helplessly. All he had to do was roll up his sleeves, bend down, and start pulling weeds one by one. If you don't even get rid of the weeds, what kind of trouble is this planting experiment going to cause? Actually. In fact, it's not necessary. When I induce birth, my mental power can accurately lock the tubers and accurately provide the power of nature. I don't have to worry about those weeds. Greet wanted to murmur like this. But seeing how happy Idian was in pulling weeds, he had no choice but to fly out a few mage hands to help pull the weeds together. He didn't want to get hit in the head a few times. After the ground was cleared, Gretel gathered his energy and continued targeted killing. Suspected pathogenic strain A, suspected pathogenic strain B, suspected pathogenic strain C. Dozens of potatoes, cut into 200 to 300 pieces, throw one shot in each area to kill them. In the last area, throw nothing away and keep it as the control group. Then, give birth. Gretel knelt on one knee and pressed his right hand on the ground. A misty blue light appeared from his fingertips and spread along the ground. Idian sighed beside him. You're not that good, are you? You're already at level 12. You can spawn these potatoes by just standing and waving your hands, right? If it doesn't work, just throw your oak stick over there. Well, life still needs a sense of ritual. Gretel smiled. Well, I accept the opinion and will not change it. A wave of green light filled the air, and tender green seedlings emerged from the ground. Sprouting, growing stems, growing leaves? The first area is affected. The second area is affected. The third area. Sarah held a notebook and walked through the potato fields with light steps. Her eyes were sharp and she kept scanning around. After spinning around for a while, he suddenly let out a surprised yet. There is no disease in Area 5. Build a barrier and isolate each area. Greet ordered decisively. Sarala waved her hand gently, and the transparent barrier quietly rose up into the sky. Gretel smiled and nodded to her, continuing to induce labor. It's blooming, it's blooming. The fifth area is still free of disease. It's not good, the fifth area is infected. The leaves are starting to wither. This is not an illness, Idian couldn't help it again. This is when the potatoes are about to mature. The leaves begin to wither and turn yellow. All the power is accumulated in the rhizomes. If you dig up the soil now, you can see that the potatoes underneath are starting to grow. Ah, that's it? Sirara shrugged at him and made a quick note. After all the growth processes were completed, the ground was dug up, and sure enough, the other plants were all in pieces, moldy, withered, and only the fifth area was intact. Gretel held the test tube and raised a smile to Idian. I've done it. As long as we target this diseased plant and kill all the potato tubers and all the potato fields left as seeds, there will be no more potato harvests in the future. He went to the old priest with great interest. Unexpectedly, after hearing what he said, the old priest lowered his head and pondered, and remained silent for a long time. What's the matter? Gretel's happiness was half extinguished by him. After a while, the old priest waved away the soldiers around him and let out a long sigh. Honorable Linsing, thank you for your selfless help. However, the failure of the potato harvest is the wrath of the god of potatoes and the punishment of the god of potatoes. As long as we continue to serve him devoutly, he will forgive us and return to us. Bless us. What? Gretel was speechless. If you don't want me to help, you should have told me earlier. You told me to leave everything to the god of potatoes. No matter how energetic I am, can't I use it elsewhere? Why did I bother to do experiments until midnight yesterday? He almost got up and left. As soon as he pressed his hands on his knees, the old priest suddenly raised his head and blinked at him quickly. There was a cunning look in his cloudy old eyes. However, God's blessings often appear in unexpected ways for us mortals. For example, you, distinguished Linsing, are you sent by the god of potatoes to help us? We mortals have no way of knowing God's will. What? Is there any other way to explain this? This is really. The so-called the doctor cured my disease, thank God. Gretel was always a proud person, so he turned around and left, leaving these natives to die. However, in his heart, these natives were first of all human beings, people suffering from famine, and then followers of some god. If you claim that you are sent by the god of potatoes to help, then just claim it. Anyway, if you declare like this, he will have a lot of meat, and the god of nature will not lack a piece of meat either. Yes, I was indeed inspired by the god of potatoes and came to help its devout people. Greet nodded solemnly. The old priest let out a long sigh of relief, put his hand on his chest, and slowly bent down. Thank the potato gods. Thank the potato god, Greet echoed dryly, trying hard not to laugh. He stretched out a mage's hand to the old priest, supported his arm, and walked slowly towards the potato field. Around the cave, around the residential area, around the hilltop where they live. For a moment, Gretel held his breath gently. Terraced fields, large tracts of terraced fields, in this indigenous area where slash and burn farming takes place, it seems that terraced fields that should not appear, layer by layer, appear on the opposite hilltop. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Lingyayu for the 10,000 starting coins reward. Congratulations to Lingya for being single. Emma, another day of desperately checking papers. Who would have thought that potato late blight was actually a fungus, and who would have thought that most of the similar strains of this fungus are non-toxic, and only a small part are virulent? Who would have thought that because fungi reproduce with spores, they need to be trapped when separated, instead of just being separated like bacteria? Despair. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1147. Greet took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled. On such a big mountain, if you want to grow something, you can only rely on terraced fields. However, such vast, layer upon layer of terraced fields flattening the entire mountaintop. If it is a modern society, there are enough agricultural machinery. In other words, even in a feudal society, there were enough oxen, plows, sickles and hoes. Terraced fields of this scale will be opened as soon as they are opened. However, as far as what I saw yesterday, most of the spear tips of the soldiers who came to greet them were stones. If you don't have metal for a spear tip, you still want metal for a fence. Just relying on wooden sticks, stone axes, and stone shovels, how did these people open up such a vast area of terraced fields with their hands and feet? Greet sighed silently, and walked slowly closer to the old priest, even forgetting to ride a phantom pony to be lazy. Walking in the withered yellow terraced fields that had been harvested, I listened to the old priest pointing. This is a cornfield. The yield of corn is actually not large, but a large amount of corn must be used to brew wine for sacrifices. Oh! You don't even have enough food to eat, and you have to spend a lot of food to make wine. You deserve to be famine. In the year without summer, the kingdom issued a ban on alcohol. This is a bean field, plant beans this year, potatoes next year, rotate. Beans fertilize the fields, and potatoes use up fertilizer very well. And he remembered that in his previous life, eating only corn and potatoes would cause a lack of certain amino acids, causing people to get pellagra, and beans just made up for this nutrition. The balance of nature is so mysterious. Gretel nodded and walked across the field with an oak stick, 1 foot high and 1 foot low. The oak staff quietly sprouted short roots, inserted them into the field, quickly pulled them out, inserted them again, and pulled them out again. The invisible and formless magical power quietly dispersed. Centered on the landing point of the oak cane, it penetrates deep into the soil and kills the pathogenic bacteria of potato diseases in a targeted manner. Gretel looked at it under the microscope yesterday. This fungus spreads by spores. The vitality of spores can be quite tenacious. If it can lie dormant in the soil for several winters, Greet would not be surprised at all. The spores of Bacillus anthracis can still lie dormant for decades. The old priest watched Greet walk over step by step. A glimmer of light flashed in his muddy old eyes, but he remained calm. He accompanied Gretel through the ridge of fields. Seeing that everyone accompanying him was following dozens of steps away, he slowly said, "Dear Linsing, your magic seems to have nothing visible." Oh, of course Greet deployed his mental power to control the range of the spell release, making sure that the killing effect penetrated more than half a meter underground. Hearing this, he said, "It's just to kill some fungi. Why do you need such strong light and shadow? Or, if you need it, I can brighten the light so that everyone can see that the potato disease has been cured." Light, shadow, and visual effects are also very important in spreading faith. Some people don't believe in the curative effect unless they see various lights and shadows. In Gretel's previous life, a place where there was no supernatural power, there were still many magicians who tried their best to do magic and create a lot of special effects. As for the visual effects of divine magic in this world, they are even more varied. Although Greet himself wished he could save every bit of power and use it all for actual therapeutic effects. However, if the other party has needs, it is not impossible to satisfy them. Ah, no need. The old priest squinted his eyes and smiled, and deep wrinkles gathered on his face. You can just walk around like this. Let's be quiet, don't make any noise, don't let anyone find out, let them think that you just walked around here. Huh. Old man, you are very insidious. Greet looked at the old priest with admiration. Although the previous exchanges had allowed him to see the flexible bottom line of the old priest's faith, This wave of remarks still surprised him. Don't make any noise, don't let anyone find out. So I'm doing nothing for nothing? Although I don't care about working for free, but you can at least give me an explanation. SHH. The old priest raised a finger, pressed it to his lips, and blew a long breath. It seems that this gesture of silence is used all over the world. He winked at Gretel again and laughed in a low voice. The kingdom has a law that prohibits accepting treatment from outside priests. Otherwise, the outside priests, the people receiving treatment, and even the patient's family members will all die. The priests of this tribe will also be whipped. So cruel. Gretel was shocked. He looked up and down, looking at the old priest, and then turned to look at the terraces. If you are not allowed to govern people, what about the land? I have treated the terraced fields here and the potatoes that have been planted. Will all the potatoes be burned down, all the fields burned, or even dug out and thrown to the bottom of the cliff? We can just leave. I expect the kingdom will not come to trouble a half-step legend for no reason. What about you? Stay here and get whipped. Ah, managing people is more troublesome, but managing potatoes and fields shouldn't matter. As if he could read the shock and concern on his face, the old man smiled at Gretel and shook his head. I'm just afraid that the children will talk nonsense. If you can have less trouble, you will have less trouble. Dear Linsing, your spell has almost no light and sound. This is great. Please continue. Therefore, the old priest asked him to help treat the diseased land despite the risk of being whipped. Gretel's impression of the old man became better again, and he walked forward step by step, leaning on his oak staff. After walking through 2 potato fields, he suddenly asked, "Isn't this law too unkind? If a family is sick and about to die, they are not allowed to receive treatment from outside priests. Do they want others to watch their family members die? Ah, this law is not aimed at people like you." The old priest sighed longly. He walked beside Gretel step by step, looking northwest. Honorable Linsing, although you have always lived in the big forest, many tribes have legends about you. We know that people like you are friends and come with good intentions. But dash. He held his cane, stood upright tremblingly, and pointed in the direction of the sun. There, those robbers deceived our king and killed our compatriots. Our kings and our priests fell to their swords in pieces, the magnificent palaces were demolished by them, and the solemn temples were destroyed. They trample. Greet's face suddenly became serious. He knew that this matter was another sin caused by the Glory Holy See. Many years ago, the Holy See of Glory occupied the Storm Islands and the southern half of the New World. Among the territories they occupied, there should be silver mines and gold mines that could stably produce precious metals, so much so that they needed to be transported back to the mainland every year, and in the past few years, they had obviously established new territories. The time when the Parliament attacked the treasure fleet, if those gold plates, golden bowls, golden crowns, and golden staffs unloaded from the treasure fleet had not conquered a kingdom, Gretel would no longer believe it. Those robbers do the same thing every time, the old priest said angrily. Although our place is remote, we have heard of their ways. Every time, priests are sent here first, pretending to be here to help people and heal them. To treat your illnesses and solve your problems. Giving you all kinds of good things. Greet nodded solemnly. It is true that some missionaries came to help the local natives with devout faith and guide them to convert to the Lord of Glory. Traveling in the wilderness, wandering through miasma, and surviving 9 deaths without regrets. For example, the pastor Martin whom I met on the Blackgate Peninsula was so simple, sincere, and kind that even if he was in a hostile force, he could not help but recognize the brilliance of his personality. However, more missionaries harbor evil intentions. Better yet, explore the local terrain, climate, hydrology, and production, and then come back to guide the army. It's almost like that. Who is that? Anyway, it was like a certain priest who hung up a street lamp, colluding with the local evil god, and ruining countless lives with a blanket carrying smallpox. Such missionaries and priests were beaten one by the local indigenous kingdom, and they even strictly prohibited citizens from receiving their treatment. Greed actually could understand it. They captured the capital, and they killed the king. The king's youngest son, with the surviving nobles and priests, fled south, to a place where they could not catch up. However, the entire kingdom was severely damaged. Having said this, the old priest let out a long sigh. He calmed down his angry look, put his left hand on his chest, and bowed his head deeply to Gretel. "Honorable Linsing, I'm very sorry. I can't promote your achievements in the tribe. I can only attribute them to our gods. In fact, the gods who protect us have been very seriously injured. At this time, every word of piety, all prayers are useful to the gods. Our sun god, our wind god, our corn god, our potato god." He looked up to the sky. Gretel raised his head following his line of sight and saw a condor spreading its wings and hovering on the top of a high mountain. "And our condor? When dawn comes, the condor carries our sun god on its back and rushes out of the horizon. Now, every bit of power is very precious to them, and there is really no way to give it to you." Greed let out a long sigh. Subconsciously, the cold voice of Della Van Luja sounded in his ears. "About to die? The sun god is dying? The main god of their kingdom is dying? Also, if the kingdom is attacked, how can the gods who protect it not fight hard? If it wants to annex a kingdom, the Holy Sea of Glory will definitely send out troops. Maybe there will be legendary masters in the expeditionary force." In that earth-shattering battle, it was not unusual for several gods to be injured. "I understand. Thank you for informing me. I will try not to take action." He nodded seriously. After thinking about it, I still resisted the next sentence. "How can I help?" Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks at bookfriend 202103011064590383880 for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1148. Greed walked slowly around the potato field, slowly killing the pathogenic bacteria. While walking, I listened to the old priest talking about the stories between the gods. The supreme sun god who illuminates the world. The condor that carries the sun on its back and travels through every dark night. Quetzalcoatl, the gentle and holy god who bestows fertility on the earth. The god of corn, the god of potatoes, the god of pumpkins who make crops flourish, the god of frogs who bring rain, the god of gourds who was born from the heads of gods. Gretel hummed, trying to keep smiling. This is different from the northern part of the New World. The gods there still have some physical entities, although they are more terrifying: a red stone at the entrance of the village, a birch forest, or a deer waiting to be eaten. There are indeed some gods here, and their divinity sounds relatively high. However, most of the stories don't sound very reliable. Fortunately, such patience is not without reward. After walking around the potato field, he returned to the old priest's residence. The old man rummaged around and took out a gourd from the collection, and presented it to Greed with great care. "Honorable Linsing, we will definitely remember your help to us. Words cannot express our gratitude, and we cannot repay your kindness to us with just words." Greed looked at the gourd in his hand in a daze. A yellow-skinned gourd, palm long, a little crooked, dry, and hard. No matter how you look at it, this is just a gourd grown by villagers and picked from a gourd stand. Speaking of power fluctuations, there is a bit of it, but it doesn't look very strong. Oh, and he doesn't look so upright, so he doesn't deserve to be included in the art world and be played around with. As for the gold gourd, silver gourd, Lejun's gourd that can harvest all things, they look even less like them. Ah, I got this gourd from a distant plateau. The old priest smiled and turned the gourd over, revealing the statue of the god carved on it. It was a human figure wearing a hat and wielding two sticks. The ribbon on the side of the hat hangs down to the shoulders, and the boots are long and pointed, sticking out far away. The whole person looks like he is dancing. The carvings on the gourds are quite simple, and can even be said to have the childishness unique to primitive humans. The body and limbs are all incised, a large piece is shoveled deeply with a knife, and then burned black with fire. Only the humanoid head, outlined with thin lines, was extremely different from the limbs of the body. The shape cannot be said to be very similar to the Halloween pumpkin head, it can only be said to be exactly the same, with a wide grin and several sharp teeth up and down, as if smiling. "This is the pumpkin god?" Greet asked tentatively. The old man smiled and shook his head. "No, this is the god of sticks. Look at this image, it's a very old statue of god of sticks." Gretel. "How does this piece of shit look like a stick god? Besides, why is there a god called the stick god? What kind of power does a stick have that it needs to be worshipped?" "Oh, don't underestimate the stick god." The old man smiled, put the gourd into Greet's hand, and pressed it hard. "It is one of the oldest gods. When the sun god created the world, he used it to shape humans. The corn god planted corn and used it to dig holes. The feathered serpent god took it when he walked through the underworld. Beat it in your hands. Why does it sound like a holy weapon of merit?" Gretel muttered secretly, and then heard the old man say, "So the stick god is a very powerful god. Although it doesn't fight much, when it jumps up and hits people, even the god of war will get a stick on the forehead, and, in daily life, it can help you a lot. When you get lost, you can still show the way." "I understand, just like the Nordic god Loki, he has many evil intentions and does a lot of damage." Greet instantly imagined an image of a cunning little god, and smiled and thanked the old man. The old man pointed to his oak staff. "Don't you have a wooden stick? Hang it on the head of the stick. The breath of the grass and trees can nourish it and it will help you a lot." "No, wait, there is a gourd hanging on the head of the wooden stick. Why does it sound like someone selling medicine on the street?" Greet held back his complaints and hung up the gourd as the old man said, planning to put it away immediately after leaving the tribe. The old man watched with satisfaction as he followed his words and bowed his head slightly. "Dear Linsing, thank you for trying your best to save us from famine when the potato harvest ends. The old man has one more request dash." He raised his arm and waved outward. "You don't often pass by here. So, if there is a similar potato disease outbreak in the future, how should we contain it? Can you please leave some guidance? Please ask your potato god to send down his divine power?" Greet wanted to complain like this. After thinking about it, he got up. "I'll do a few more experiments." He knew the threshold was too high without anyone reminding him about targeted killing of pathogenic bacteria. Regardless of the power fluctuations in this old priest's body, he probably looks like he is at level 4 or 5. There is too much basic knowledge behind it, and he will definitely not be able to learn it. Then, we have to leave some more general methods, such as pesticides and the like. Gretel knows almost nothing about this aspect, and only knows a few basics. Bring some diseased potatoes and we'll try them. Fortunately, he didn't move so fast. He only swept the potato fields and didn't kill all the potatoes stored by the tribe. Soon, there was a pile of potatoes and various minerals piled in front of Gretel. "This is lime. This is, forget it, no need to take the identification test, it's plant ash. This is blue vitriol. I'll get some more disinfectant and try everything." As for what kind of drugs can kill fungi, Greet looked through medical microbiology and was able to name a few. For example, ketoconazole, miconazole, itraconazole, voriconazole. But he could only recite the name of the medicine, and he had to go to the pharmacy to get the specific medicine. You want to ask him how to produce this medicine, sorry, goodbye. Then, he remembered that washing with lime water might kill fungi, and washing with plant ash solution might also work. Of course, after washing, the pH value of the soil changes, and whether potatoes can grow is another question. Problem. Oh, there is another artifact that cannot be forgotten, that is Bordeaux mixture. The famous Bordeaux mixture, or a sky blue liquid made of 500 grams of copper sulfate, 500 grams of hydrated lime, and 50 kilograms of water, is very useful for killing mold. Why is it called Bordeaux liquid? Isn't it because people in the Bordeaux region spray it on grape leaves to sterilize it and protect the grape harvest? Under Greet's command, the women of the tribe rolled up their sleeves and chopped the potatoes into small pieces, each piece carrying 1 or 2 or 3 spores. Soak, wash, and dry in lime water, plant ash solution, disinfectant water, or Bordeaux solution. Greet throws in a little magic as appropriate. Then, find a place to plant it, and the magic will be born. Washing with lime water can kill some germs, but they don't look very good. Gretel recorded everything and printed the image with the meditation core for copying. Wash with plant ash solution. The effect of killing pathogenic fungi is so weak that it is almost non-existent. Wash with disinfectant water. The effect is not very good, and the potato seedlings do not grow well, so wash with Bordeaux liquid. Powerful Bordeaux liquid. The universal Bordeaux liquid. Potatoes soaked in Bordeaux liquid grow energetic and healthy. Greet was delighted and opened her eyes hard. After recording this scene, continue to supply the power of nature and continue to give birth to. On potatoes washed with plant ash solution, green spots and white mold spots appeared visibly to the naked eye, and then, as if a fire was ignited in the potato field, it spread to the surrounding plants. Gretel was quick-witted and quickly pulled out the diseased plant with his mage's hand. He picked up the Bordeaux liquid and sprayed it around. Keep giving birth. Alas, the potato plants that have been sprayed are still growing upward healthily. It seems that this potion is very useful. Gretel straightened up with a victorious smile and pointed out to the old priest. Use it to soak potatoes, and then dry them in the sun? Dry them in the shade? In short, dry and store them, which can kill the things that make potatoes sick. If there are still diseased plants in the field, pull them out as soon as possible, take them to a distant place and burn them, and then use this spray the surrounding plants with chemicals. The old priest was very grateful. Satisfied, Gretel embarked on the road to move forward, slinging the oak staff behind his back, with a gourd dangling on the top of the staff. I picked up a floating saucer and started to seize the time to write my thesis on the root causes and prevention and control methods of potato diseases. Well, it seems like no one has done this topic selection before. It doesn't matter even if someone has done it. The worst thing is that you will repeat it with others and lose a little energy in research and writing papers. It would be great if I could help. Potatoes are also grown on a large scale in the kingdom. Potato disease prevention and control methods are always needed. He writes happily, including keywords, abstracts, ideas, experimental processes, experimental results. His pen moves like flying, and he writes down with a splash. The manuscript paper was changed one after another. Udian and others saw that he was busy, so they lowered their voices one by one and tried not to disturb him. Suddenly, Sarala, who was walking behind, whispered. Gretel. Your gourd. What? My gourd? What gourd do I have? Where do I have a gourd? Greet pulled his head out of the paper and shook it hard twice before remembering that he had just obtained a gourd, which was said to have the power of the stick god. He took off the oak staff from his shoulder, turned his head and glanced, his face darkened. Snake. Oak staff. You have gone too far. He raised his hand and shook it, until the gourd rattled. Poor Stick God's gourd was hung up for less than half a day before a big hole was chewed out. The little snake coiled around the top of the oak staff, clicking, 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 and there was a fragment of a gourd near its mouth. Below, the oak staff stretched out 4 leaves and attached them to the gourd. The leaves had silently submerged into the gourd. You two guys are so ungrateful. I didn't even see it, but you two secretly attacked me and divided up my things. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1149. Hey, you guys are going too far. When did I stop you from eating? What do you want to eat? Why don't you say hello to me? Spit it out. Gretel picked, pulled the little snake out of the broken gourd, caught it in his hand, and swung it around. The little snake hung in his hand as if it were alive, without coiling it around his wrist or turning around to bite it. It looked like you can throw it away, I'm just a piece of firewood. Gretel shook it a few times, not even getting rid of the gourd skin from its mouth, and then turned back to shake the oak stick. What's wrong with you? You're a tree. Okay, put the leaves on it and chew the gourd skin. What are you trying to do? You don't have a mouth, so you still have to chew it. There was a crack on the bark of the oak staff, 2 centimeters above where Gretel's fingers were holding it. On the left, on the right, the canines are staggered, looking like 2 rows of sharp teeth. Greet moved her fingers urgently. Hey, I'm even more angry. By opening a crack like this, do you mean to say, you also have a mouth, and you can bite? Idion and Sirara secretly laughed. Even Della Van Losha, who was always taciturn, smiled, moved forward, and touched the oak staff in Greet's hand. They want to eat, it must be good for them. You can communicate with them directly and ask them carefully. After finishing a long series of words, there was silence on the mountain road. After a while, Udian took out his ears and shouted in disbelief. Della, was it you who spoke just now? You actually said such a long string of words. Loosia gave him a roll of her eyes, turned back, and became silent again. Idian shrugged, turned his head to the other side, and muttered. It's true, I can talk so much with little Gretel, but I can only speak 2 or 3 words with me. Greet finished venting his emotions about the gourd he just got was killed inexplicably, lay on the back of the phantom colt, and continued to write his thesis. The shadow of the sun gradually slanted to the west, and pieces of writing paper were stuffed into the space bag. Finally, he stretched out with satisfaction. Ah! Finished. Gretel crossed his fingers, raised his wrist, and tried to rotate. As he turned around, he muttered. Ah, I write thousands of words by hand every day, so tired. Why didn't you write it by hand before? Udian couldn't stand it anymore and complained again. Who doesn't write by hand these days? As a spellcaster whose physical strength is equal to that of a knight, he starts to groan after writing a few words, indicating that his hands are tired. I'm really tired. Gretel continued to rub his wrist, and even threw a healing spell on it. There is no computer or keyboard, so writing by hand is really tiring. In the past, oak sticks helped me write, or tower spirits helped me write, only very important papers were handwritten word by word. Most of them were written by me, and they helped output the text. Now oak staff was too busy gnawing on the gourd to pay attention to him. In the mage tower, the tower spirit can scan his experimental records and then output most of the contents on his behalf, but now he is alone outside, and there is no tower spirit to help him work. Although the meditation core can calculate and store, it seems that it cannot control its own hands and write on its behalf. Besides, even if he could do it, wouldn't it be because his own hands were busy? You're too lazy to forget it? Idian couldn't help but rolled his eyes. Greet smiled cheekily at him and looked around. Hey, where have we been? Where will we stay tonight? Come on, we'll reach the mining area just a little further away. Udayan raised his finger and pointed. I see you've been busy writing, so I didn't bother you. Use the flying technique and fly over the 2 hills. There is a small distribution center. Let's go there first and have a look. If the number of mines there is not enough, we can search further down. Gretel nodded, packed up his belongings, and waved away the phantom pony. Next to him, Luoxia waved his hand gently, and a group flight technique landed on everyone. Idian, Bernard, and Appa immediately flew up and lined up beside her. Only Cyrilla shrugged her shoulders and shook her whole body as if she had been caught in the rain. Invisible power surged, throwing away the group flying technique blessed by Luoxia. The silver dragon girl nodded to her, her eyes curved happily, and then she ran over and took Gretel's hand. Gretel, let's go together. Greet slapped his backhand and added a dragon flying technique to himself. The powerful golden red dragon wings spread out from behind, lifting him up into the sky slowly. Behind Cyrilla, a pair of broad silver wings also spread out. The 2 of them rose side by side and leaped towards the opposite mountain. Skimming one mountain, another mountain, and then slowly descending on the air current. Less than halfway up the mountain, people were already running below, waving and shouting at the top of their lungs. Udian pointed downwards, and the breeze wrapped the airflow and sent it to everyone's ears. Did you see that small manor? We'll stay there tonight. To be honest, Gretel didn't really see any manor anywhere. Looking down, I can barely see some tall and short houses on the hillside, houses and houses. Most of the houses are short adobe houses with thatched roofs. If they present a neat visual effect, it is only because of the liberal use of lime, which painted the exterior walls white. There is also a stone house, with large stones stacked together, and the walls seem to be a little crooked. As for how many gaps there are in the wall and how much cold wind blows in at night, Greet doesn't want to think about it at all. Of course, there are also slightly better houses inside. To be precise, there is one standing among a circle of stone walls half a person's height. It is made entirely of stones. Compared with the slum next to it, this house has at least 2 floors and covers an area of 200 square meters. There is also a tall building in the corner, which is probably a watchtower or something like that. It can have 3 floors, or 4 floors. The person waving his hands and shouting at them was standing in front of the 2-story building. Udian pointed the direction and flew down with everyone. The man immediately stepped forward and bowed reservedly. Dear sir, welcome to my mansion. I am Mank will serve you wholeheartedly. If you have any needs, I will try my best to help you. You're welcome. Udian nodded lightly. He waved to Gretel and others and stepped forward. We'll arrange it at the place where I stayed last time for now. As for dinner, it's the same as last time. If there's anything extra I need, I'll tell you then. As he spoke, he casually threw out a long animal tooth. Ayamank accepted it gratefully and led them inside. Greet stayed behind silently, looking left and right, and realized that Ayamank might really be a noble. He was the only one wearing a bright woolen coat, made of wool dyed in red, white, and black, and the material was relatively fine. A thick gold earring dangled from the long earlobe. The busy servants around him were either wearing coarse cotton coats or natural woolen jackets. The roughness of the fabric is only slightly better than that of a blanket. It's hard to imagine how you can wear it without feeling itchy. Even more so when it's time to eat. There was a long table in the center of the dining room. They were placed on this table and ate together with the host's family. Ayamank, a woman who was obviously his wife, two teenagers, and a cute little girl. As soon as Greet and the others sat down, the girl came jumping up to them, holding a plate of pie in her hand. "You guys are so beautiful." She raised her head, smiled sweetly, and held the plate of fragrant pie to Cyrilla. "I made this with my own hands today. Dear guests, I give it to you. I wish you a happy dinner." Cyrilla took the plate with a smile and touched her shoulder. The little girl is wearing a bright woolen cloak. The material is particularly delicate and has a touch of velvet. Cyrilla touched it once, then touched it again, lingering. "This dress is very beautiful. What is it made of?" "This is a manta, made of alpaca hair. Such a good manta, only my mother in the whole village can weave it." The girl held her head high and looked proud. "I will also learn this craft in the future and learn to weave manta that is more delicate than this." Do daughters of minor aristocratic families also need to learn to weave their own textiles? Greet glanced sideways. Cyrilla had already taken out a fruit candy and put it in her hand. "This dress is really nice. Do you have any better materials? I also want to buy one to make clothes." "Yes, yes," the little girl nodded vigorously. He paused, feeling a little worried again, and tied his thin eyebrows into two knots. "But this is not the best. The best one is called Kambai. Only kings and high priests can afford to wear it. It must be woven from the wool of specially raised alpacas." "I'm good. I want to learn that kind of craft." "Irapa. Don't say such things." The housewife of this house suddenly changed her expression and shouted to stop. The little girl stuck out her tongue, bowed to the guests, turned and ran away. Greet looked over without knowing why, and saw the housewife raising her head and reluctantly smiling at them. "This kind of craft is not something that small nobles like us can learn, only people from the specialized weaving academy, the king's concubines, and the Virgin of the Sun can learn this kind of craft." "Virgin of the Sun?" Greet's ears perked up. Just as he was about to ask, there was suddenly a burst of noise outside, coming from far away. Ayamank ran out quickly, and soon saw a group of servants coming in carrying a short wooden sedan. The nobleman or official sitting on the sedan chair was more luxuriously dressed than Ayamank and had more gold ornaments on his body. He looked around, his eyes lit up when he saw Cyrilla and the others, and he quickly turned to the male host. "Congratulations. Under the order of the High Priest, the Virgin of the Sun has started the selection again, and your little daughter has been selected. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Wolf2 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1150. "What? Are you going to choose Sun Virgin again?" Ayamank's face lost all color. It was the first time that Greet had seen such a face that had been sunburned and rosy after living on the plateau for a long time, and it could actually look so pale. The little noble's body trembled slightly and his voice was hoarse. "Didn't you just choose it a few years ago?" "The past few years were the past few years. The officials who came to choose the candidate, or perhaps the nobles, were much richer than Ayamank. The trek on the plateau mountain road obviously did not make him lose anything. 2 pieces of meat." He slowly cut off the fattest piece of barbecue on the dinner plate, stuffed it into his mouth, and chewed it until his mouth was full of oil. After finishing eating, he glanced at the host calmly and said slowly, "I have chosen in the past few years, but it's not like I can't choose again this year. Besides, becoming a Virgin of the Sun is the supreme honor of every woman in the kingdom. Only the most beautiful, intelligent, and noble girls can be selected." As he said that, he looked at the little girl at the end of the dining table and smiled. He nodded and raised his chin slightly. "What do you think?" The little girl felt her father's nervousness, her face turned slightly pale, She tilted her body and subconsciously held her mother's scarf, as if to hide her body behind her mother. However, upon hearing the words "the most beautiful, the smartest, and the noblest," her petite body relaxed a little and her eyes began to shine. Can I be selected? This means that I am the most beautiful, smartest, and noblest girl in the kingdom? Can I learn the legendary weaving skills and weave the best kangbai in the world? She didn't speak, but she straightened her spine a little and raised her head. The official who came to select the candidate smiled encouragingly at her, and then turned to Ayamank. "Why, you can't bear it?" A suffocating atmosphere enveloped the table. With a pale face, Ayamank looked at his little daughter and then at his two sons on the other side. Finally, he bowed his head respectfully. "It is the duty of every noble to serve the great sun god." "Is this right?" The visitor smiled and drank half a glass of wine calmly. His gaze swept across the long table, pausing for a moment on the two female guests with pointed ears, but finally took it back. "These two people are extremely beautiful, but their appearance is unique and they do not look like the people of the sun god. Moreover, both themselves and others around them exude an aura of not to be trifled with. Forget it, don't look for trouble. When you come out this time, just get enough of what you need to catch, and don't add unnecessary complications. It would be foolish to have something happen where it shouldn't happen." He ate and drank quietly, no longer looking for trouble. The atmosphere at the long table was extremely depressing. Even the servants serving the dishes were very gentle and did not dare to make any sound. There are only a variety of dishes served on the long table. No salt, spices, or leavening agents are added, just the original flavor of corn, fluffy and fragrant tortillas. A bunch of fresh pumpkin flowers, fried fragrantly in the oil pan. Mushrooms baked with cheese, pick them up with a fork and pull out long sticky strands. Greed took a bite, and the taste of this cheese was unlike anything he had ever tasted. "What kind of cheese is this?" he asked Idian quietly. Idian crossed the fork and pointed at the clay pot that had just been served on the table. "That's cheese made from alpaca milk. What's on the table now is alpaca meat." The meat is quite tender and looks like it's a baby alpaca, which is generous. Alpacas are usually raised for shearing. Milking cows, rarely killing food. Alpaca. Alpaca meat." Greet thought about the kind of round-faced, honest-looking, and cute animals that were kept as pets of internet celebrities, and there was something wrong with him. Sarala was very interested. "Alpaca? What is that? I haven't seen it yet. Can you go and see it later? It's already dark and I can't see clearly now. Maybe tomorrow." Gretel actually wanted to ask what is the Virgin of the Sun, but looking at the atmosphere at the table, he also knew that this was not the right time to ask. It's not that you can't chat with spells such as communication, but whether it's the owner of the family or the officials who come to select people, they all have power fluctuations. It's okay if you don't get noticed, but if you do, it will be very embarrassing. He endured it until the meal was finished, and was led to the guest room by the host, and then he couldn't wait to ask Idian. Idian sighed. Sun virgins, as the name suggests, are people who serve the sun god. In name, they are priestesses of the sun god and concubines of the sun god. But in fact, the sun god can't marry them, Cyrilla muttered to the side. Idian nodded. That's right. Although the sun god of this country can perform miracles, he really cannot walk on the earth to marry them. Therefore, except for a few girls who are particularly qualified or of particularly noble birth, can they become real priestess, others. What about the others? Greet shuddered subconsciously. Idian shook his head, his tone pitiful. Sacrifice. Gretel was speechless. He paused, looked around, then raised his hand and waved. An invisible sound barrier fell, and he whispered. So, this sudden large-scale request for sacrifices is related to. Having said this, he remained silent and raised his hand to point at the top of his head. Idion nodded heavily. I don't rule out this possibility. But, don't worry about this kind of thing. You can't afford such a big thing, and neither can I. Gretel nodded sadly. If you ask Idion to say I can't stand it, I guess this indigenous sun god will not be a level 18 or 9 monster. He might be a legend, or higher. He definitely couldn't get involved in this kind of thing unless Teacher Yao came over. The question is, why does the teacher care about things here? Just be honest, get the Borax you need, and go back to the elf forest as soon as possible. Even if the sky falls, there will be tall people who can hold it up. He can't hold it up anyway. The guest room was quiet, everyone was thinking about their own thoughts. Idion was planning how to get enough Borax. Greed was thinking about how much Borax was needed for the first batch and how to get these things back. Lucia had a straight face, and no one knew what she was thinking. Only Sarala pricked up her ears and looked around. That little girl looks well behaved and has a cute smile. Is she really going to be a sacrifice? Do not. Is there any way to save her? Little did the silver dragon girl know that similar things to today were happening in many places in the kingdom on the plateau. In the temple of the royal capital, the statue of the sun god lit up and dimmed, and lit up again, but could not break away from a layer of misty black air. And further afield, plans against this kingdom, against the sun god and the gods of the kingdom are also being brewed. Is the news accurate? In the governor's palace of the Governor-General of Pelu, Governor Sainco Martinez frowned with a black sword eyebrow and moved his fingers on the map. On the thick sheepskin map, the lines are zigzag, thick or thin, deep or shallow. Beside the lines, there are large and small circles or triangles, marking the existence of mountain peaks or lakes. Just by looking at the randomness of the lines, you can tell that this map was produced many years ago, and its accuracy can make every military commander cry. Martinez looked at the map like he was looking at a rare treasure. After some time, there will really be great changes in that indigenous kingdom? Is it possible that their false gods will fall? That's what the intelligence said. In front of Martinez, stood a young priest in his 20s with a fair and handsome face and deep and flexible eyes. He pressed his ink-stained fingers on the map, followed a thick line, and jumped over one by one. Here, 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 all the nobles in these towns were asked for girls aged 10 to 12 years old. We speculate that such large-scale requests may be used as sacrifices. Human sacrifice? Sure enough, they are indigenous people, very barbaric. Martinez grunted in disgust. He stroked the map for a while, spread his fingers, and pressed heavily on the map. Has the location of the new royal capital been confirmed? Not yet, the young priest replied softly. After a pause, before the governor's brows condensed again, he hurriedly said. However, in order to destroy this kingdom, it is not necessary to determine the location of the royal capital first. According to the church's calculations, in a few months, the light of the false god may be temporarily obscured. During this period, the power of the false god will hit rock bottom. The false gods are indeed false gods, Governor Martinez sneered. The light is blocked. The light of the Lord of Glory will always hang high in the sky, shining on all things, and it will never be obscured. Only false gods would have this kind of light disappear, and at the same time their strength would decline and they would fall into the valley. The church speculates that this is the best time for us to deal with the false gods. Of course, we need the help of the governor's palace, otherwise, we may not be able to do it just by relying on the power of Archbishop Bartolome. Martinez hummed and tapped the scabbard lightly. Although the false god of that kingdom is only a false god, his power cannot be underestimated. There must be a legend. Moreover, a legend is not safe. Of course, the Governor-General of Pelu is not unable to use this power. Based on the size, territory, and population of the Governor-General of Pelu, there are enough two legends in charge of this Governor-General. One is Bartolome, who sits in the cathedral. The other one is Governor Martinez himself. The two legends, together with their masters, have a chance of winning, but this also means that all the elites in the governor's region will be available. Let me think about it, let me think about it again. The gold and silver sent back home last time disappeared inexplicably, and the heavenly knight who rushed over was also killed. For this reason, both the governor's palace and the cathedral have been criticized at home. This money can certainly be replenished, but why do the powerful men in the governor's district dig into their own pockets for no reason? It's always good to find help from others. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1151. How many troops can we mobilize? Before deciding to send troops, of course, you must do a thorough research. Governor Martinez asked the young priest to go back and spread his message, asking the archbishop to calculate the strength of the church system, and he also called in the staff of the governor's palace. How much can high-level soldiers use, how much can ordinary knights use, and how much can soldiers use? In addition to people, how much power can be extracted from related war materials? When the governor gave the order, of course the staff went to work like crazy. If an action succeeds, they may not get credit for it, but if the action fails, the blame will definitely fall on them. Who said your intelligence collection was incomplete? Who said your plan was imperfect? It's not your fault, but is it the fault of the powerful, glorious, legendary swordsman Governor Martinez, the pillar of the kingdom? Look at the failure of the Storm Islands operation and what happened to those unlucky staff officers. In view of this, the 15-member staff team of the General Staff Department of the Governor's Palace turned over and over the map of the Governor's Palace, the tax information, the army roster, and the material list. The Chief of Staff kept urging, "Hurry! Hurry! The governors of the Holy See have asked the Archbishop to do the statistics. If we can't come up with the numbers when their results come out, the governors will skin me, so I'll skin you guys first. Work! Work all night long. You bunch of useless civil servants are not spellcasters. How can you be so delicate? Even if you stay up all night for 2 consecutive days, you still have to come up with the numbers for me." But Lord Balvic, a young staff officer who had stayed up all night and had red eyes, protested weakly. "As soon as I opened my mouth, there was a strong smell of low-quality coffee, which mixed with my breath and spurted out. With this little time, we don't even have enough time to check the warehouse. If what is written on the schedule is not in the warehouse, wouldn't we be unlucky in the end?" This. Chief of Staff Balvic hesitated. He hesitated for a moment, and then he immediately continued to curse. "Idiot! Who asked you to check the details of the warehouse? We just make plans according to the things in the booklet. If we can't hand over the things when we set off, it's the pigs in charge of the warehouse. If we have to explain it, they have to explain it to the headquarters." Oh. The staff members exchanged subtle glances with each other. I understand. Those who manage warehouses have always been fat men. People who can manage warehouses have various backgrounds. Going to inspect the warehouse now and offending those people with a backup for no reason is completely unworthy. Anyway, if you can't hand over the things at that time, whether you find a scapegoat or perform a fire dragon to burn down the warehouse, it's all the fattened pigs' own business and has nothing to do with their general staff. Under the guidance of this all paperwork, the entire mobilization plan was written back in 3 drafts, revised in 2 drafts, and finally submitted before the governor's patience ran out. Governor Martinez took one look and frowned. Only 3,000 people can be used. I remember that the kingdom has at least 50,000 people stationed here, right? There are indeed 50,000 troops stationed in the Governor-General area of the kingdom. Chief of Staff Balvik opened a pair of blood-red eyes and calmly explained to the governor. But these 50,000 people are scattered across millions of square kilometers of land from the Storm Islands in the north to the edge of the indigenous kingdom in the south. At least 10,000 of them are navy. These navies certainly cannot allow them to climb the plateau. Governor Martinez nodded reluctantly. The chief of staff continued to explain. Among the remaining 40,000 people, there are 5,000 troops stationed at Polasi Yinchan and Polasi City. Yinchan is the foundation of the Governor-General. Unless it is a last resort, this army can only be strengthened, not weakened. There are still 35,000 people. Governor Martinez sat down across from the heavy teak long table, crossed his fingers, and bent his palms to support his chin. Under the thick black eyebrows, the eyes have become slightly softer. Not necessarily, we can only draw 3,000 people, right? Mr. Governor, you want to see how many cities and minerals we have in our hands? Mr. Chief of Staff sighed helplessly. Come on, let's do the calculations one by one. Kama Port is the largest port nearby. It is responsible for transporting the products of the governorate. There are 1,000 troops stationed in the city. It's not much, right? It can't be any less, right? Really? He counted them one by one: cities, mines, fortresses, 100 people, 50 people, 30, 20 people. After finishing the round, he sighed to the governor. This is the maximum number of troops that I can calculate. Including the guards of the governor's mansion, it is exactly 3,000. If you still don't think it is enough, you can only recruit veterans and adventurers who are never satisfied. Those people, let me think about it again. Governor Martinez frowned. The Governor-General of Pelu has been established for several decades, and indeed many veterans have retired from the army, got married, and had children there. However, their fighting power in the Viceroyalty of Pelu, in fact, in all the viceroyalties shrouded in the glory of the Holy See, have a tacit chain of contempt. The natives from the Old World are first-class people, and the native white people who were born and raised in the New World, here refers to those whose parents are both white, are the second-class people. The father is white and the mother is a local aboriginal, whether they are aboriginal nobles or ordinary aborigines. In short, those with some local blood are third-class people. As for the local aborigines, there is no doubt that they can only be fourth-class people. Want to recruit soldiers from the second and third classes? Not to mention their reliability, their combat ability alone is enough to make the governor frown. After all, if a warrior is strong enough, he will never be unable to find a wife in his native land. Where are those indigenous nobles? He asked reluctantly. Having taken so many benefits from us, and even intermarried with us so many times, when it's time to contribute, you don't have to do anything, right? The transfer of indigenous nobles does not fall within the purview of the General Staff. Chief of Staff Balvik bowed gently with a soft smile and skillfully passed the blame. Of course, the staff has not discussed this issue. The assessment result is that this war is not a war between kingdoms to seize territory and resources, but to attack their gods. The beliefs of these indigenous nobles may require sorted out further. In fact, in order to quickly annex the indigenous kingdom and establish the governorate of Pelu, or in order to quickly exploit the Polasi Silver Mountain, the governorate of Pelu adopted a completely different governance method from the governorate of the Storm Islands. The Governor-General of the Storm Islands killed all the local nobles, chieftains, and anyone with a little bit of resistance. Then, plantations were established on the islands and slaves were driven to grow various cash crops. If there are not enough people, they will be transported from the Black Continent. The Governor-General of Pelu, on the other hand, handed over a large amount of ruling power to the local indigenous nobles. Use marriage, mainly marrying indigenous noble women to bring the power of the indigenous nobles under their control. Kingdom. Kingdom power? In addition to maintaining armaments and maintaining local suppression, basically all we have to do is sit back and collect taxes. Of course, such rule must make concessions to the local indigenous people. Over the past few decades, the indigenous nobles have also entered churches and worshipped the Lord of Glory, but how much of their original faith is left? Well, anyway, even the glorious Holy See basically turns a blind eye to the faith issues of these indigenous nobles. I understand. The Archbishop and I will discuss it further. Governor Martinez rubbed his temples and sighed. Alas, the governor's palace doesn't care about these indigenous nobles because the faith of the Lord belongs to the Lord. The Holy See doesn't care about these things, so there is a limit to how much money you can make, okay. The preparations for dispatching troops at the governor's palace in Pelu are proceeding slowly and stumblingly. On the other side of the plateau, the elves' purchase of Borax is also proceeding slowly and stumblingly. You want 100,000 boxes. Ayamank felt like his tongue was tied. The distinguished outsider in front of him opened his mouth and said 100,000 boxes. How much is 100,000 boxes? Ayamank exhausted his imagination and couldn't figure it out. Is it enough to fill this warehouse? Is it enough to fill the entire mine? Or, fill up this small town established for the purpose of trading ore? No, not that much. The young nobleman, who had seen his daughter away and stayed up all night, shook his head vigorously with red eyes. Moon sand is not a commonly used thing, and you can't use that much in a year. In our small town, it's pretty good to be able to sell 5 or 10 boxes of moon sand a year. There really aren't that many. What about the mining area? Udian didn't think about buying everything in one place. Hearing this, he was not impatient. He threw out a few coins at random, swept away 10 boxes of Ueming sand in the warehouse, and followed the clues and asked, "Where is the largest mining area nearby? Who is the mine owner? If I go to the mining area to purchase, or go directly to the mine owner, can I buy the amount I need?" "I'm afraid I can't buy it." Ayamank thought about it carefully and shook his head with confidence. "Dear guest, although moon sand is not a particularly valuable thing, it has not many uses. Apart from casting gold and silverware, making some utensils and medicines, it is rarely used. As far as I know, there are several mines nearby. Altogether, the annual output does not exceed 100 boxes. We elves don't use it very much either." Idian complained silently. "Therefore, how much you can buy in the end depends on the reserves in the mine. Can you take me to the mine to have a look?" Of course, distinguished guest." Ayamank nodded. Idian breathed out, turned around and raised his voice. "Greet, Sarara, let's go. Whatever you want to see, you can see it on the way." "Coming!" Gretel shouted from a distance. He agreed and looked back at the silver dragon girl. "Sarala, stay away from them. If they don't want to play with you, don't hug them, late." The frightened alpaca made a sound and sprayed saliva all over Sarala's face. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1152. Idian is negotiating a deal with his master. Sarara wandered around other people's estates, looking here and playing there. Gretel accompanied Sarala, holding on to the indigenous servant, asking questions. "What are you growing on this land?" "Potatoes." "Are the potatoes growing well this year?" "What are they growing on this field?" "Pumpkins." "Are these beans?" "Do you raise these alpacas?" "What do they eat?" "Do you cut the grass for them to eat, or do you take them out to eat grass every day?" Bring them back at night. Greet has great enthusiasm for the customs, plants, animals, and ecology of this indigenous kingdom. In contrast, Cyrilla is only interested in those cute animals. The head is a bit like a camel, and the body is a bit like a sheep. It is covered with gray-white, light brown, gray-yellow, and brown curly long hair, which looks and feels warm. He has a round face and looks very honest, with a pair of small ears and gentle eyes. He is about the same height as a human, which means he can look directly into human eyes. They have a docile and quiet temperament. Even if Cyrilla goes to touch them, they will not run away in panic, but will stand there obediently while being touched. For such a cute animal, although it is already an adult judging from the dimension of strength, Cyrilla is still a young dragon in terms of age, and a very young dragon at that. Of course, she has no resistance. She only stood outside the animal pen and watched for a while, then climbed into the animal pen without hesitation. He touched this one, hugged that one, stretched out his hand to give the other one a sniff, and finally, he picked up a soft cub from the ground and held it in his arms. Then, the frightened alpaca sprayed him in the face without warning. Ah! It stinks. It stinks. It stinks. Cyrilla's face changed. She jumped back subconsciously, jumped 2 or 3 feet out of thin air, and appeared outside the animal pen. The native servant who was explaining to Gretel was shocked and jumped back instinctively. However, in her rush, Cyrilla actually forgot to put down the alpaca calf in her hand. So, the docile alpaca continued to launch its usual attacks. Pooh! Pooh! Ba 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 ba! Not only the cubs, but the entire alpaca herd came over. A group of more than a dozen alpacas, led by the tallest and strongest male, collectively launched a spitting attack. For a moment, there were endless sounds of ba-ba, spittle fell like rain, and a hood covered his face came over Greet. Greet's expression changed drastically. He didn't even have time to direct Cyrilla, so he quickly put up the protective shield. Yasha! It stinks. These alpacas, forget about spitting, sneeze and other secretions, even if they spray some ruminant products, I understand you. Why are you guys spouting shit? What are your pylorus and cardia used for, and why do they spit out in the opposite direction unimpeded? No wonder it had another name on the internet in its previous life. At this time, I really want to shout it out. While holding onto the protective shield, he turned around and patted her with 17 or 8 cleaning techniques in a row, from Cyrilla's hair to her cheeks, shoulders to soles of her feet. While taking pictures, I muttered to the cub. It's okay, she won't hurt you, be good, don't be nervous, don't spit, be good. Cyrilla finally reacted. As soon as she bent down, the alpaca calf fell to the ground and ran away. I ran back to the animal pen and was lifted up by the indigenous servant, who carried me across the animal pen and plunged into the belly of the female alpaca, bleeding loudly. Cyrilla pouted and turned away. She stopped hugging the alpacas, and stopped touching the cubs. She even tore off the colorful cloak made of alpaca wool that the mistress had just given her and threw it on the ground. This animal is so annoying. So stinky. I originally wanted to buy one to play with, but now, Gretel followed with a wry smile, and at the same time showed a comforting smile to the aboriginal servant who turned pale with horror. Walking back to Udian, I heard him say slowly. I have already negotiated it. The owner does not have much goods in hand, but he is willing to take us to the mining area to have a look. As for how much we can get from the mining area, it depends on our own prospecting results. They have reached an agreement, and Ayamank has given the order. Soon, the entire manor started to move. Grill the tortillas for the tortillas, prepare the meat sauce for the meat sauce, prepare the water bladder for the water bladder. Servants ran in and out, fetching some of the tallest and strongest alpacas, watering them, feeding them, putting them on saddles and bridles, and getting them ready to go. Ayamank came over with a smile and asked Idian. Do guests need to prepare mounts? How many are needed? These alpacas are raised in our own manner. They are very docile and will never lose their temper. No. Gretel and Cyrilla answered in unison. In less than half a day, the departure team was ready. Ayamank rode on the tallest alpaca, and several male servants led the way, carrying weapons or various equipment on their backs. In addition, there were 5 or 6 alpacas in the team. They all had saddles on their bodies and large baskets made of branches were set up on both sides. The baskets are filled with bags one after another. It is obvious that they are used to carry goods every day. Cyrilla summoned a phantom pony early in the morning, far away from the alpacas and falling at the end of the team. Greet stayed with her for a while with a smile. Unable to suppress his curiosity, he urged the phantom pony to go up and ask. Can these alpacas carry so much cargo on a mountain road? The phantom horse he rides is completely black, with only its mane and tail appearing gray. Its forehooves are like smoke, and it can be clearly seen that it has no entity. The servant glanced at the phantom pony fearfully, and answered bravely. It can walk. Of course it can walk. Your Honorable Sir, we have been using them to carry things for generations. This kind of beast has been growing here, and it is very stable when walking on mountain roads. Very stable indeed. Greet observed carefully that the toes of these alpacas were widely spread apart, and they stepped firmly on the narrow mountain road, and they were quite steady every step of the way. Occasionally, sand or stones roll down from under their hooves, but it does not affect their balance at all. Looking back, I saw that Appa was following the end of the team, moving down step by step. That frightening posture was obviously not as stable as the alpacas. There is no way, although they are all artiodactyls, and although the silver moon deer is even a high-level monster, its hooves are grown for running in the wilderness, and it is not suitable for walking on narrow mountain roads. Cyrilla, take good care of Appa. Gretel shouted from a distance. Cyrilla responded, turned around and called the barbarian. Bernard, come down and hold Appa. Appa, if that doesn't work, you can become smaller and let Bernard carry you. Hold head high. Silver Moon Deer raised its head and shouted. Bernard quickly hugged its neck. We are not angry, we are not angry. Or, look at what an alpaca's hooves look like. If you change the hooves like that, won't it make it walk more steadily? I didn't just say that I can change. A group of people chatted and walked for 2 days on the winding mountain road, and finally arrived at the nearest borax mine, which the locals call Moonstone. Ayamank took the lead with the alpaca, called the manager of the mine to ask a few questions, and then came back with a respectful report. Dear sir, the annual output of this mine is about 100 boxes. If adults are in a hurry and are willing to pay a large price, the mine can double the output by recruiting a few more people to work. If doubled, that would be 200 boxes, in other words, about 200 tons, basically a drop in the bucket for the needs of the elf secret realm. Idian frowned and asked. Can there be more? For example, 10 people, 20 people, 100 people. Honorable Sir, the nearby villages only have so few manpower, so they can't recruit many, Ayamank said with an apologetic smile. You see, our land can only support so many people in total. When the farming is busy, everyone works, and when the farming is slack, they come to the mine to mine. Besides, the mine is only so big. How many more people can be filled in? They have to dig a few more mine tunnels. Mining is a technical job. Even if Idian had never mined mines himself, he knew that the rude and noisy group of dwarves had always said that mining was a technical job. How to dig a stone, grab a handful of soil, taste the ore, and find the ore seedlings. No matter how hard you knock, you can determine the direction of the vein even in the dark by intuition. How to dig out a mine that can accommodate people in and out with shovel after shovel in the dark, how to use wooden frames to support it, how to prevent water seepage in the mine, how to identify the direction when digging. The noble and elegant elves do not do such rough work themselves, but thanks to living long enough, they still know a superficial knowledge of many things. So he also knew that Iamank was telling the truth. It might not be useful to pile 100 people in there. He clicked his tongue, carefully looked at the mine not far away, and asked again. How much Ueming sand is there in this mine? Have no idea. Gretel pursed his lips next to him. Well, ascertaining reserves or something like that is probably too technically difficult for the natives, but the probability that the elves themselves can do it is not very high. He wouldn't know it anyway, it's so far away and there's no way he can shake the dwarf over. Udayan obviously doesn't either. However, he is not anxious, angry, or annoyed. Calm and calm, well prepared. He turned his attention to Luoxia, who came with him. Delavan Losha took 2 steps forward. With a quick glance, he softly uttered 2 words. Step aside. She asked you to get out of the way, Udayan translated beside him. While serving as a mouthpiece, he rushed and pulled everyone aside. A clear space was soon left in front of the mine. Luzia took out a small clay doll and muttered. On the ground, dark yellow rays of light formed one after another, forming the shape of a 6-pointed star. Soon, a round-headed, stocky-looking earth element emerged from the 6-pointed star. Luoxia stepped forward, took out a handful of moonlight sand, and put it into the hands of the earth element. The earth elemental nodded towards her and sank into the ground. Soon, Greet felt obvious elemental fluctuations and headed all the way towards the mine. Gretel. Are you amazing because your magic is strong? Well, the magic is powerful, which is indeed amazing. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @bookfriend202210111304399086 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1153. Delavan Losha stood quietly in front of the mine, her eyes lowered and motionless. The mountain wind howled, rushing all the way from the pass between the 2 mountains, making her sleeves and robe corners rattle. However, not one of the female elf's brilliant silver hair danced wildly in the wind. At best, only the tips of the hair could be seen swaying slightly. It is obvious that this elf spellcaster has reached a very sophisticated level of control over his own energy. It was quiet. Idian, Gretel, and Cyrilla stood in a row, blocking the surrounding natives intentionally or unintentionally. Bernard stood further away, his arm resting on Appa, who had returned to his original shape. The huge body of the silver moon deer was like a high wall. Just standing there could suppress the nearby natives from uttering a sound. Iamank, the servants brought by this little nobleman, the stewards of the mine, the miners who have not yet entered the nearby mines, and even the peasant women who do menial work in the mine, cook and wash the miners, all stand tall from a distance. He was looking around dozens of steps away. Men and women, old and young, no one dared to make a sound. Even the rows of alpacas were pacified by servants, lest they scream and offend these noble and strange outsiders. Although alpacas are usually very quiet and rarely shout. Such a quiet environment is actually dispensable for high-level spellcasters like Luoxia. However, it is undeniable that it does provide convenience for Gretel. As soon as the earth element appeared, Gretel held his breath and concentrated, extending his mental power. Well, although the earth element is getting farther and farther away from her, there has always been a close connection with Luoxia. This way of connecting is very interesting. Greet sensed it for a while, then turned his attention to the earth element. After entering the mine, the earth element seemed to have melted away. In other words, it is like a drop of ink falling into clear water, spreading outward. Gretel raised an eyebrow. The way the earth element spreads is not spreading out evenly and steadily, but one by one, layer by layer. From a rough spherical shape, it quickly turned into a pufferfish shape, and then into an octopus shape. Is this spreading along the veins? Or, spread out along the gaps in the veins and along the weak soil parts? Gretel was thoughtful. The form of the earth element swimming in the veins seemed to provide him with some inspiration, but he couldn't grasp it vaguely. It seems like, maybe. The earth element was swimming and spreading. One moment it expands to wrap something, and the next moment it contracts and condenses, continuing to move. Up, down, left, right. Gretel was observing so much that he couldn't feel that time passed bit by bit and the sun moved from one side of his head to the other. The other people next to me were bored. They couldn't move or talk, and they had to keep quiet. They weren't yet spellcasters, so they couldn't use the communication spell to chat without restrictions. Udayan looks at his nose with his eyes, his nose with his mouth, and his mouth with his heart, just to exercise his patience. Sararo looked left and right, and simply positioned her role as protecting Gretel. She pressed the long knife on her waist and tried her best to shoot around, assuming a vigilant posture for him. Bernard shifted his weight to his left foot, then to his right foot. If you didn't have to pay attention to your image in front of outsiders, it would be possible to just sit down. After a long time, Greet opened his eyes and whispered, "Okay." Sararo breathed a long sigh of relief, finally let go of her right hand, and leaned towards him impatiently. How? Shh. Greet put her finger to her lips, signaling her to keep her voice down. He turned his attention to the six-pointed star, and soon, the round-headed earth element emerged from the center of the six-pointed star little by little. After gesticulating, he began to communicate with Luoxia. If the language of the earth element has a language, it is not within the translation scope of language comprehension. However, Luoxia obviously understood what the other party meant. She nodded repeatedly and smiled, communicating with the other party quite smoothly. Soon, the earth element raised a thick and short arm and waved upward vigorously. The front end of the arm suddenly exploded and turned into a cloud of yellow dust, but it did not disperse. It formed a sphere as big as a basketball in the air. What is this? Greet tried hard to guess. It didn't take long for him to see the answer. On the earth element's other arm, a small ball of borax was condensed, no more than the size of two fists. Then, his thick and short arm turned sideways and made a strong gesture to the other side. How can such a small piece of borax be extracted from such a large piece of ore? Greet felt that he roughly understood the meaning of the earth element. Unfortunately, he couldn't see the rest of the exchange. He could only see Luoxia gently nodding and smiling at the earth element. Finally, he took out a piece of amber and put it in the opponent's palm. The earth element clenched its fists, sank to the ground, and disappeared. Luoxia stood silent for a while, then turned to Idian and others. Naru said that the reserves of this vein are not large, only 500 tons at most. If necessary, it and its companions can help extract it. To extract all the moonlight sand, in addition to all the magic power support we provide, we also 10 thumb-sized pieces of amber are needed. This prospecting for earth elements, mining for earth elements, it's very good and powerful, as expected of the elves. The magic is so powerful that you can really do whatever you want. Gretel complained silently. After finishing complaining, he started to calculate quickly again. 500 tons of ore requires 10 thumb-sized ambers. If we want to pour 100,000 tons of borax this time, how many ambers will be needed? 2,000 pieces. Are the elves' inventories that rich? Or other gems can also be used to pay the bill? What is the conversion ratio to amber? 1 to 1? Or, the conversion between gems is not based on size, but based on the power contained within? 500 tons. Idian was concerned about another thing. If it's a little less, this place can only be used as a backup. It's best to find a relatively large mineral vein and get 51,000 tons back in one go. It's really troublesome to open the mine one at a time. Of course, even with 5,000 tons or 10,000 tons of ore, he couldn't provide the earth element with the power to do the work. Even if he could provide it, he wouldn't be able to drag the borax he mined. However, if there is such a big mine, Elder Fahim can be bothered to make a trip. Legend still has some good stuff in his hands. Okay, I've remembered this place. Thank you for your hard work, Loxia. Let's go to the next place. The next place is a small city. Although in Gretel's eyes, this crap is not much bigger than a town, but according to Ayamank's introduction, this is indeed a city. This is Bomba City, the largest city nearby and the largest market nearby. When deciding on the next stop, Ayamank introduced them to them. If you can't buy what you want here, then you can only go to the royal capital. They followed the river valley to the west. To Gretel's expectation, the water volume of the river here was quite large, and could almost be called surging. Even when walking on the mountain path at a high altitude, the sound of gurgling water still filled their ears. But the river valley is still too steep and sparsely vegetated to retain that much water. To this end, people built many irrigation canals, allowing water from upstream to spread along the irrigation canals and flow into the farmland. Large expanses of cotton fields spread out along the river valley, and soft cotton bolls covered the hillside. Sarala stepped forward curiously, picked one and broke it open, feeling a little surprised. Gretel, this cotton is pink. Yes, the cotton here is pink. Yudian took a few steps slower, turned back and approached. Not only are there pink ones, but there are also blue ones, yellow ones, and all kinds of colors. Natural colored cotton. Let me tell you a secret. These cottons of various colors were made by a senior elf who was bored. It was spawned. Do you want another color? Sarala nodded quickly. Natural colored cotton. Although she doesn't often wear cotton clothes, these soft and plump cotton bolls are very interesting to look at. Idian smiled slightly. He pointed at Greet casually. Come on, tell him what color you want and let him give birth to you. Gretel was suddenly slapped with a blame. I haven't offended you recently, have I? Why did this job suddenly fall on me? You are also a nature walker. Yudian spread his hands confidently. Natural walkers and spellcasters can produce cotton of various colors. Can you still be stumped? It's time for you to find some plants to practice your skills. The medicine that Elder Fahim usually uses cannot be collected at the moment. He gave birth to it easily. Gretel turned his head silently. You say, if I want to cure malaria or something, I can go find a bunch of wormwood or other wormwood and ask them to enrich me with artemisinin, then forget it. Just for the sake of looking good, let me spawn colored cotton? Brother, that's not the case. In an agricultural society, the direction of the river indicates the direction of the gathering place. After 2 days of walking along the river valley, a city spread out in front of them. To Gretel's expectation, this city called Bomba did not have a huge stone square or a towering temple. Instead, there were huge mounds. It was a much larger and flatter mound than what Greet had seen among the bison tribe on the back of the New World. There are no stone carvings, no reliefs on houses or columns, and no paintings. What caught Gretel's eye were the various colorful textiles. Dozens of inch-wide colorful ribbons surrounded the wooden posts on all sides. Bright flags were erected on the roofs, rustling in the wind. Curtains with bright patterns hang down from the eaves, covering the wide window lattice. In contrast, the fabrics on the pedestrians walking by the roadside, especially those poor people with yellow faces and skinny muscles, only had a dull white color. Those who are covered with silkworms are not silkworm farmers. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of